Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Soul Symbols Astrology and I'm Karen Sullivan. So this week I'm looking at a very powerful configuration in the sky for the week beginning the 25th of May. So the main focus is Mars in Taurus, moving into a square with Pluto in Aquarius, whilst Pluto is making a trine to the Sun in Gemini. So we've got Mars, Pluto and the Sun all speaking to one another through the early degrees of fixed Earth, Taurus, fixed air, Aquarius and mutable air, the Sun in Gemini. And I'm going to have a look at this through the Sabian symbols because the symbols for these degrees are incredibly evocative and they fit so perfectly the archetypal signatures of these transits. So Pluto in Aquarius is giving us an image in the Sabian symbols of a masked figure performing ritualistic acts in a mystery play. Very deep, Plutonian deep. And Mars in Taurus is the image for that is a cantilever bridge across a deep gorge, and the Sun in Gemini is giving us the image of workmen drilling for oil. Before we even get to the astrology, we've got the landscape of collective ritual, hidden power, embodied effort, deep excavation, and the need to build a bridge across a divide. I'll also briefly at the end bring in the full moon in Sagittarius, which is happening on Sunday the 31st, right at the end of the week. I'll be covering it more fully in Friday's contemplation, but it belongs in this weekly forecast because it brings the Taurus New Moon cycle to a point of illumination. And of course, we got Mars moving through there now. What was planted in Taurus is coming to that flower under the fire and horizon of Sagittarius. So let's begin by looking at the chart. I shall just get that up. 1 second. Here we are. First thing to notice is Mars here in Taurus and Pluto in Aquarius here, and both around that 5th degree forming that fixed square. And Pluto is in the superior position, pressing down. So this is the central pressure point of the week for us. Mars in Taurus is in fixed Earth, so that's embodied, dense, sensual, slow burning, and of course stubborn. Mars here is not its normal speed, it's not quick, light, or easily diverted. So what Mars is wanting is the ground beneath its feet and substance, security, stability, resources, body, land, food, beauty, value and continuity. So any of those areas you might be noticing this week. Then we have Pluto in Aquarius in this fixed air. And this is power moving through systems, collectives and technologies. So we can look at ideologies, social structures here, networks, and all those future-facing visions that Aquarius brings. So Pluto in Aquarius, we're not talking about the personal in an ordinary sense. It's speaking here of deep collective forces, so that unseen pressure beneath the surface of society, or the way the larger patterns move through groups and individuals. And I'm recording this on the 18th, the week before this goes out, and over the weekend, on the 16th, we had those massive global marches for commemoration of the Nakba, which is still ongoing. So we can see the pressure building. Yeah, I won't say too much about that now, but that's large collective bringing pressure. Okay, pressure bubbling up that's been bubbling for the last, well, since Pluto went into Aquarius in 2023. So visually, this chart, we can see that strong tension between Taurus and Aquarius here. As I said, Taurus is the body, the earth, and Aquarius is the system, the collective pattern. So Taurus will be asking what's real, felt, held, what can we sustain? Whereas Aquarius is asking what's changing in the collective field, being reorganized. What sort of futures are we collectively imagining? And where's that power? What power? Where is it that's moving through the group? That's the square, that's the tension. Then we can see here Pluto making that trine to the Sun in Gemini at 5 degrees. So the Sun in Gemini is bringing attention to all the mercurial things, language, information, thought, speech, curiosity. And we're also looking at messages, the messages that come and the interpretation of them. But the movement of the mind, whether that's singularly or collectively. And with Pluto here in that trine to the Sun, there's depth behind the thinking. So it's not that surface level thinking, it's the mind drilling down. So the mind wanting to know what, what's underneath the story or the narrative. There's a push here for it to uncover what's been hidden, buried, denied, or compressed. And again, we see this out in the collective with all the files coming out, whether they be the Epstein files or the UFO files. There's that thirst and that arising from underneath the things that have been hidden for years. It's that kind of flavour. And that will become very important when we come to the Sabian symbol for the Sun, because the image is literally workmen drilling for oil. And there's a lot to be said about that also, the extraction of oil. So we can also notice here Mercury in Gemini in this chart. So it strengthens the sense that the week has got a lot to do with the mind's words, interpretation, that communication and story. Mercury rules Gemini here and is in his own temple. So then I would draw attention to Venus here in Cancer. Okay, Venus rules Taurus, so she's ruling Mars here. Venus here is in her own bounds and she's been separating from a sextile to Mars. So that gives Mars that recent connection to Venus. So this is going to soften the picture slightly. Mars square Pluto can be a very harsh signature, but we've got Venus in the picture here. So underneath that pressure of Mars and Pluto, there's that thread of care, protection, a sense of belonging and kinship. And it's going to bring a level of emotional intelligence here. So Mars in Taurus here may be under pressure, but Mars is touched by that Venus in Cancer. So we can look at it that Mars is touched by feeling. And those urges to act, they're going to be around care rather than force. And then we have Saturn in here in Aries. This is important because Saturn rules Aquarius. Saturn's in the bounds of Venus too. So even the harder structures in the chart are being asked to answer to Venus in some way. There's a subtle message here that force, discipline, pressure and collective power need to remember proportion, value, relationship and care. And I'm just going to move us on to Sunday, the 31st of May. And here we have the moon at 9 degrees of Sagittarius and the sun opposite in Gemini. So it's bringing the week to a culmination across the Gemini-Sagittarius axis here. So we've got information with the Gemini and meaning with Sagittarius. So words and truth. Okay, so there may be that curiosity that Gemini brings, but that broad vision of Sagittarius. So those facts that we're gathering and the larger story that we're going to place them within. Mars is now further into Taurus, activating the ground of that Taurus New Moon cycle. This full moon's not floating separately from the rest of this week. It's part of the same unfolding story. So we talked about that new moon in Taurus as the fertile valley, and it's rising now towards the wider horizon of Sagittarius. So that's the image, the charts for the sky. Let's come back from the chart. So we're moving to the more symbolic landscape now, because it's where our week really begins to speak. The first image we have is Pluto in Aquarius, and in the Sabian symbols, that's the masked figure performing ritualistic acts in a mystery play. So it's a powerful image for Pluto in Aquarius. That masked figure isn't acting just as an individual. He's carrying a role, he, she, that is carrying a role. They're part of a larger pattern. So that sense of being a vessel for something larger than a personal identity. And in the old mystery traditions, ritual was a way of giving form to the forces that were greater than the individual. It allowed the person to participate consciously in cosmic, natural, ancestral, collective powers. That mask wasn't there for disguise. It was a sign that the person had stepped into archetypal function. Okay, so powerful for Pluto. And with Pluto here, we're in the territory of transpersonal power. So it's that power that moves through the collective, that's older than the individual. And that power rises through systems, myths, it comes through institutions, group ideologies, but also ancestral patterns and that deep undercurrents of the age, so the zeitgeist of the age. And in Aquarius, this can speak to the rituals of the collective mind, the collective consciousness, those rituals of a society and of technology, but also it can be the rituals of public discourse and belonging. It's the masks people wear inside a group, the ways people become carriers for a movement, an idea, a system, or an invisible social pressure. I was speaking earlier about the global marches. We become there, we wear the mask of the activist. We wear it alongside everyone else. We're marching under a flag, so to speak. So it's that essence. But we have Pluto in the bounds of Mercury here, so that's strong around language, messaging, symbolism, but also codes and scripts, information. It's the thought forms. So the mystery play could be happening through words and images, definitely through the media and narratives that are circulating in the collective field. So keep your eyes out for that, because you'll see the archetype at play, the archetypal landscape. But for us, it means that the question of the week can be, what am I participating in? And looking at the roles we're performing and the stories and narratives moving through us, it may uncover where we're wearing masks without actually being conscious we're wearing them, okay, without knowing it. So yeah, Pluto's very good at uncovering those things. And that isn't automatically negative. Ritual is sacred, or it can be sacred. It can bind us to something meaningful and connect our personal life to the deep life of the collective. So important at the moment that we realize we're more than one. We are a collective, and that's powerful. So Pluto is always asking us to look at the shadow of that as well. So perhaps we need to look where ritual becomes compulsion, where a group maybe takes over individuals, or the mask, the role, the activity, the flag we're marching under begins to wear us. Okay, so that belonging, we're possessed by that sense of belonging. So these are good things to look at this week. Then we've got Taurus, Mars in Taurus, that's going to bring us that second image, and that's the cantilever bridge across the deep gorge. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Someone can tell me. It sounds like something to eat, cantilever, right? So it's a really helpful symbol for this week, because that Mars square Pluto can feel very pressurized. It can come very forcefully and bring an intensity and confrontation to us. But Mars in Pluto can also bring immense willpower and courage, okay, and along with that drive and passion to make determined efforts. But it can also bring that need for renewal. And what we need to be aware of is that it can be volcanic. It can bring a catharsis and a strength to face something that perhaps we've avoided individually or collectively here. But it can also become too much. The pushing can become real force, okay? There can be a ruthlessness here, this overexertion. There's words such as brutal, locked in power struggles with the Pluto there as well. So a compulsiveness to it. There is that shadow, and it's a powerful shadow. And we'll probably see that more in the sense of countries, power struggles with countries, leaders. But that can come through our personal life and our smaller collectives. But this Sabian symbol is giving us a higher task of that Mars in Taurus. Mars is by nature martial, so we can think of weapons, but this symbol is giving us a bridge, not a weapon. That gorge of that Sabian symbol is a real divide. It's in the landscape, so we can't wish it away. And we can't cross it by sentiment, we can't think we can do this and leap a gorge. So we're facing whatever that gorge is, probably more in the symbolic, metaphorical sense. We need to face it as part of the landscape. And a bridge is a human response to that separation. So it's effort, structure, skill. We need cooperation and patience to build a bridge. We can't build a bridge alone. That Mars in Taurus is saying to us, build something real here. It's a very different expression of Mars than that Mars in Aries, perhaps. So we're not looking at an image of a warrior charging forward, swinging his sword. It's the builder and the labourer. So Mars is bringing force into matter. We can look at it as the application of our will in the physical world. So we can look at endurance and construction, but we can also look at this energetics of persistence and embodied action. So if we're tired at whatever we're working on, whatever bridges we are building, there is this beautiful persistence, energetic of persistence and embodied action this week. And on the Sabian symbol, we have a keynote, and it speaks of conquest of separateness through group cooperation. So we're not just building personal bridges here, it's a social one. It's the places where people have become divided. I mean, we are divided, so divided as a people, but it's also where people have become isolated or cut off from one another. So it's about the need to create a crossing where there's been massive divide, a chasm. Hello, I'm just interrupting this weekly forecast to let you know about a really exciting development. I've just created a free resource called The Dance of the Sun and Moon. The offering is a gentle introduction to the practice of inner alchemy, and it's done through working with the lunar cycle. So rather than approaching it through astrology, it's an invitation to notice your own rhythms through the changing relationship between the sun and the moon each week. So with this, you'll find the free offering, you'll find an audio reflection that introduces the symbolism of the sun and the moon. There's a simple 4-stage framework for working through the lunar cycle and reflective prompts for each phase of the moon. And there's also a contemplative practice for bringing inner awareness into your everyday life. It's an invitation to slow down, notice where you are within a given cycle, and work consciously with the rhythms of emergence, growth, release, and renewal. And I have created this, what is exciting for me, on a new platform for me called The Portal. And it is an incredible platform. It's where learning is social and, where people need people. Real communal, it is extremely communal. So it's a genuine alternative to tech broligarchy. It doesn't prod your nervous system, hijack your attention to drive that ad revenue for billionaires. The platform has been built by Sally Burns, a wonderful person and mum of 2 young kids in Brighton, UK, and she's built it along with everyone who believes in it. So the portal layers modalities of learning to meet the complexity of these times. You can browse their library of living resources. You can join all their free events, of which there are many, many, many. And you can do that when you join the community, and you can consider creating with them. It's a real new platform for the times that we're living in. Very welcoming, extremely supportive, with options of face-to-face contact there. So come and join me over on the portal, the free resource, which will be followed by a collection of resources. Okay, I'll be really happy to see you there. And that community is ready to welcome everyone in. Beautifully welcoming community. Okay, back to the forecast. Thank you for listening. This is really rich imagery. And if we remember the Pluto in Aquarius on the other side of the square, that's bringing in the collective field, the sense of system, pressure of group, those larger currents of social change. So Mars in Taurus is bringing the body, the land, the resources, and that need for safety and continuity that Taurus often brings. This square can show us where our bodies are literally under pressure from the system, but also where the earth is under pressure from, from everything. The earth is under a lot of pressure from that machine. We can look where our personal values feel under pressure from collective narratives. And that can just be your family or your community or group you're in, but where are we under pressure? We can look at where the need for peace and stability is being challenged by forces of disruption, transformation, or control. Because with all this Plutonian power and catharsis and eruption, it's not for the hell of it. It is to bring transformation, and this transformation is coming in our systems and our collective life. This bridge symbol is not just talking about resistance here. It's talking about an answer of construction, of building. Where there's an obstacle, a gorge, build the crossing. That's what that symbol is saying. And because Mars is in the bounds of Venus and Venus in Cancer separating from a sextile to Mars, this bridge is a feeling quality. So we're not talking cold engineering and strategy. It's a bridge that's being built because something vulnerable needs safe passage. And Venus in Cancer brings that image of home, of family, of our memories and belonging, that sense of protection, a womb-like space for us. Waters of feeling. Okay, so within this hard Mars-Pluto contact, there's a softer question. What are we trying to protect and trying to carry steadily across? What matters enough to build that bridge for? Good questions this week. And then we've got the Sun in Gemini with the third Sabian symbol, workmen drilling for oil. That might put your hackles up immediately, okay? But it really fascinates me, this symbol, because Gemini is often thought of that light, quick, curious, conversational, airy, mobile, but the image isn't light. It's deep excavation. It's the mind going beneath the surface in search of fuel, knowledge, wealth, or power. And when we look at oil, it's ancient life, crustaceans and matter compressed under the earth. It's residue of what was once lived, and it's been transformed through time and pressure into something potent. It can fuel movement, industry, wealth, and civilization, but it pollutes and it poisons and it contaminates the environment. So that symbol is carrying both power and warning here. We may find this week there are questions around the excavation of oil and the politics and the wars and the economics that are carrying on in the cause of oil for huge profits. Okay, look out for that. With the Sun in Gemini trine Pluto, it's a nice aspect to trine. There's a good flow to it, but there might be a strong desire to understand what's lying beneath events, and that is fantastic for research, writing, our psychological insight and symbolic thinking. This energetic is also excellent for shadow work, and if you're working on ancestral exploration, lineage, but it's also good for uncovering hidden motives here. So it's a week where our minds, Gemini, Mercury, can penetrate. But this Sabian symbol is asking us to consider the ethics of penetration. So what is it we're looking for? Is it wisdom or is it extracting fuel? Are we approaching the depths with a reverence, or are we drilling into them for ambition? Are we uncovering truth so that something can heal, or using knowledge to gain leverage? They're good questions to ask, because sometimes our motivations, and with that energy of doing shadow work, we can really confront ourselves here. We can see it in the world so easily. Sometimes it's very difficult to see that operating through us. We are individuals, but we're also part of this collective consciousness. So excellent questions, and we can untangle ourselves this week if those things are present. Nothing wrong, we've all got them. So Sun and Pluto, the significations can bring an intensity of enthusiasm, and we can have real creative potency this week. There's also that energetic of self-conquest, primal vitality, but it brings us into contact with deep natural energies. So it can bring our ego, individual, collective, into conversation with the shadow. And it can also bring the shadow side of domination, obsession, control, and the urge to display or wield your shadow material as power. And we see that a lot in the systems, in the leadership. This week, that Sun in Gemini, it's not simply asking us to gather more information. It's asking us to become conscious of what we do with the information. So if we look at our mind this week as a drill, we can ask ourselves what we're drilling for, what we're hoping to find down there. And if we do find it, what do we do with it when we bring it up? Can it tell the difference between wisdom and fuel? And we need both of those. And then after looking at these Sabian symbols, I put them all together, and the week is really coherent just from those. Okay, Pluto is giving us the mass ritual and the collective force. Mars is giving us the bridge across the gorge, and the Sun gives us the drill descending into the old compressed layers of life. So the landscape is the collective mystery play unfolding. The gorge is open before us, and the mind's drilling down to the depths. There's power everywhere in this picture. We've got ritual power, physical power, collective power, mental, primal, and buried power. That's a lot of power in 1 week. The central question becomes, can power be handled consciously? That Mars-Pluto can be such a strong aspect. It can feel like pressure building up, bringing the sense of something really volcanic beneath the surface. So we can get anger, desire, survival instinct, frustration, determination, but also the courage. But all of these things can become intensified in all of us. Okay, so we got that in the melting pot of the collective. We can experience feelings of being pushed or needing to push back here. We're talking power. So there could be a sense that something has become massively compressed and needs release. As simple as that. But that image of the bridge is wise. There's a wisdom to that symbol. It's asking us to use that energetic of intensity to build. And where we feel pressurized, we can create structure for that pressure. And our frustrations, we can use to understand where the divide is, whether it's an inner divide or it's an outer divide between us. So we can use the wheel for more than domination. We can use the wheel to really connect this week. And the Sun-Pluto trine gives real potential for insight this week. It's going to allow us to see beneath the surface and name what the shadows are, to understand those deeper currents. But again, the oil drilling image warns us, whatever's coming up from those depths needs to be handled really carefully. There's knowledge that can pollute us when we use it without wisdom, and there's power that can be really harmful when we extract it without a reverence. Power requires reverence. And there are old forces that don't belong in modern life unless they've been refined with consciousness. Make of that what you will, but that feels very poignant to me. I will put a video up there to a contemplation I done some time ago on the myth of control. Okay, that was all about power. Worth a watch, even if I say so myself. But with all this, you can feel that intensity. Just as I speak it, I can feel myself tensing a bit. It's real intense energy. But Venus is so important this week, you know, in the background. She's in Cancer, and it reminds us of care, the whole configuration of care. So we can lay back into Venus in Cancer this week and look at what is being protected and nurtured here, what's being held. You know, where do we need to pour more tenderness into things, and the sense of belonging. So Mars may be strong and Pluto deep, and that sun is drilling down. But Venus is asking whether our human hearts are still present in all that. Whatever the intensity that comes this week, either in our own lives or out there in the world, if we can put our heart central, we can't go wrong, really. I wouldn't reduce this week's astrology to just to conflict here. Yes, it's really intense and pressurized, and there's force there. And there's also that massive possibility of a power struggle this week, but there's also possibility of profoundly creative work. If we work consciously, it's the whole reason to look at the archetypal landscape. We can work with it. We can co-create with it. So this week we can build bridges, and there can be hidden truths that get revealed that are helpful, and collective patterns to recognize that we can work with. And we can wear those masks, those ritual masks, consciously rather than unconsciously. There's potential for divisions being bridged and crossed. Then as the week closes, we get to that full moon in Sagittarius. I'm going to explore this more deeply in Friday's contemplation, but for the weekly forecast, I want to put it in the larger story of the lunar cycle. This full moon is that fruit of the Taurus New Moon, and Mars is in Taurus at the moment. And that new moon, I gave the image of that fertile valley where we can plant, root, embody, where there's sensuality and patience. So about the earth, beauty and value that we can root ourselves in. Taurus is where life takes substance. So it's where we put the seed into the soil. Okay, that was the new moon. By the time we reach Sagittarius full moon, whatever was planted in that Taurus earth is raised up into the fire of Sagittarius. So Sagittarius brings us to images of the horizon, the arrow, the quest, the wild country. It gives you the vibes of the hero's journey or the heroine's journey. It's a search for meaning. It's a longing for truth here with Sagittarius. And so that movement is from the valley to the horizon here, the valley, fertile valley of Taurus to the horizon of Sagittarius. So we're going from the roots into a direction, and we're also moving from the earth of Taurus to the fire Sagittarius. So we're looking at those seeds that we planted quietly to the meaning that's unfolding, that's being revealed at this full moon. And as I said, Mars is in Taurus, and it's activating some of the old ground of that new moon. So that soil's heated and stirred. It's got will moving through it. So whatever we planted in that quiet dark of Taurus can begin to show its desire, urgency, or a need to act. We may sense that with this full moon at the end of the week. It really asks us, this full moon, what truths have ripened, and what is the meaning that's emerged from the pressure of this week. It's going to be asking what direction is being revealed, and what has our body known all along that the mind is just beginning to understand and twig onto. And because we got that sun in Gemini opposite the moon in Sagittarius, we're also dealing with that access of information and wisdom. So Gemini gathers the information and Sagittarius is seeking that larger pattern. So we've got Gemini, Mercury energy asking questions, and Sagittarius wants to frame that in meaning. So where we may drill for knowledge in Gemini, Sagittarius will want to know whether that knowledge points towards truth, to put it in the context of those Sabian symbols. So as the full moon rises at the end of the week, there may be a real sense of illumination after an excavation, that Plutonian energy. So something coming up from beneath the surface, asking to be put into a wider story. So it's bringing us back to that bridge again. And that bridge is not only between people, systems, body or collective pressure. Perhaps it's also a bridge between knowledge and wisdom and instinct and meaning. So between the old powers of the depths, all that primal energy, and the future we're trying to build together. So this week is inviting us to stay conscious of what we're participating in. That masked figure is asking us to look at the roles that we're playing, and the bridge asking to look at the divides that we're being asked to cross. That might be personal, individual, or collectively. And that drill, that image of the drill, is asking to look at what we're extracting from the depths. So the Sagittarius full moon asks us to look towards the horizon and look at the truth that's emerged individually and collectively. And if someone asked me what would be the central image of this week, I'd say we stood at the edge of a gorge. Behind us, there's that beautiful fertile valley of Taurus where we planted something, and beneath us are the old compressed powers of the deep earth. Around us, there's a collective mystery play unfolding. Think of the Greek tragedy plays, it's unfolding. And in our hands are those tools of construction and excavation. But in front of us, in my mind, there's a bridge waiting to be built. And by the end of the week, under the Sagittarius full moon, we may begin to see the wider country on either side. So it's a week that is definitely building with pressure, but it's a week for seeking knowledge without becoming extractive. It's also a week where we can participate in collective life without losing our own sense of consciousness, and allow power to become a bridge rather than a weapon we wield. And it definitely will culminate in letting the full moon show us what's been growing all along. Okay, that is what I have for you, people. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm going to do the bump. If you did, like, subscribe, drop a comment. Let me know where you are. I am actually interested where you are. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.